I'm Sandeep Ravindran. I'm a freelance science journalist. I cover life sciences and technology for a variety of publications, and I also do a lot of teaching and mentoring. Loved science as a kid. I used to devour the newspaper science section every week, watched whatever science TV shows I could. And I remember when I was 7, there was this article about DNA that suddenly convinced me that I wanted to become a genetic engineer. And I had obviously had very little idea of what that entailed, but luckily for me, I continued studying biology and continued liking biology all through sort of high school and college. What I didn't factor in was that the other thing that I was responding to was the actual science writing in the newspaper, right? And that's because I didn't realize science writing was a field. So I knew that I enjoyed science and I enjoyed writing. But when I graduated undergrad, I thought there were two different things that you had to choose between. So I ended up applying for PhD programs in biology and MFA programs in creative writing because I thought, oh, these are two completely separate paths. And as I was finishing up my PhD, I attended a talk by a science writer, and it clicked. It was like, oh, I like science, I like writing, I should do science writing. And so basically, as soon as I graduated, I went full on into freelancing and doing internships in science writing, and just kind of have continued along that path ever since. I think science communication itself, I consider it to be incredibly broad, right? It's just any way that you convey science to an audience of, it could be scientists, it could be the general public. When I got into science communication, I had no idea which of those aspects I wanted to work in. One of my first experiences in science communication when I was in grad school was actually volunteering at the local science museum.
Awesome.
And I loved it, and it was great, working with the kids, and like seeing, them sort of grasp like understanding of like DNA or genetics, and so I loved all of that. Then at some point I realized I really sort of veered more into the science journalism, side of things, which is kind of so science is its own beat within journalism, right? And you can go into it through sort of my path, where you kind of go, do a PhD or have some science background, and then realize you kind of want to go into science journalism, or the other way around, which is, you're a journalist and you decide you want to sort of get into science as your preferred beat. And so to me, like that whole spectrum of things is what I consider sort of science communication. I do think every aspiring sort of scientist, grad students, postdocs, should get some training in science communication. The reason I say not necessarily social media is because I think there's any number of like ways that they can contribute to the conversation.
Yeah.
And some people are great at social media, they love doing it, they should do that. But maybe for someone else, it's going and talking to your local like council members, right? And like trying to affect policy that way. Maybe it's going to your local like middle schools, right? So I think some training in science communication, I think I would love to see everyone in science getting that, and then also be encouraged to reach out and do outreach and engagement, like all the things that both of you are doing, but also anything else that like there's so many ways. Even talking to your like family and neighbors, right? Like just getting that outreach and engagement in whatever way that you are most comfortable with. My theory is that both scientists and science journalists too have sort of taken for granted a bit that people care about science and will support it. And I think that is unfortunately not necessarily still the case. And I think it's up to, not just those of us who are already doing it so, but everyone else who cares about science and science communication to be sort of making an affirmative case for those things. I worry about losing the public, public interest in science, public, like caring about making sure that science is funded, like all of the things that sort of, right now, like, yes, scientists are always come up as being highly trusted, but I don't think that we should take that, there are forces that are actively chipping away at that, and so I don't think we should take that for granted. And I think without good science communication, that is a real risk. Because I think a lot of the time when I talk to graduate students, and a lot of grad students reach out and are interested, but they don't know how to get started, or they think it's sort of like, oh, well, how do I write an article for the New York Times? And it doesn't have to be starting with an article for the New York Times, right? Like, do an Instagram post about your own research, write a blog post about your own research. That's, just any way that speaks to you to sort of like find a way to convey your research or any research that interests you, to an audience that doesn't know that research, I think is a great starting point.